Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Bhadajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhadajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Padavajikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivachakacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai Samveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 19th day of May 2025 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in third chapter, a Karma Yoga, page 178, text 42. Okay, we can just chant, I think. We can pick it up. Indriyani paranyahur Indriyebhyak parang manaha Manasastu parabuddhir Yo buddhe paratastu saha Indriyani paranyahur Indriyebhyak parang manaha Manasastu parabuddhir Yo buddhe paratastu saha Indriyani paranyahur Indriyebhyak parang manaha Manasastu parabuddhir Yo buddhe paratastu saha Indriyani paranyahur Indriyebhyak parang manaha. Manasastu parabuddhir. Yo buddhe padatastu saha. Indriyani paranyahu. Indriyebhyak parang manaha. Manasastu parabuddhir. Yo buddhe padatastu saha. Indriyani paranyahu. Indriyebhyak parang manaha. Manasastu parabuddhi. Yo buddhe padatastu saha. Indriyani paranyahu. Indriyebhyak parang manaha. Manasastu parabuddhi. Yo buddhe padatastu saha. Indriyani. Anyone online? Chad, you there? No, I'm sorry. No. I'm just kidding. For so long we were calling on you. And you sounded louder than everyone else because you had a tremendous microphone wherever you were. Huh? See what I started? I started a conflagration here. Indriyani, senses. Parani, superior. Ahu, are said. Indriyebhya, more than the senses. Param, superior. Manaha, mind. Manasa, more than the mind. Two, also para, superior. Buddhi, intelligence. Yaha, who? Buddhehi, more than the intelligence. Parataha, superior to, but saha, he. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses, intelligence is still higher than the mind, and he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. Purport. The senses are different outlets for the activities of lust. Lust is reserved within the body, but is given vent through the senses. Therefore, the senses are superior to the body as a whole. These outlets are not in use when there is superior consciousness or Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, the soul makes direct connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the hierarchy of bodily functions as described here ultimately ends in the Supreme Soul. Bodily action means the functions of the senses, and stopping the senses means stopping all bodily actions. But since the mind is active, then even though the body may be silent and at rest, the mind will act, as it does during dreaming. But above the mind is the determination of the intelligence, and above the intelligence is the soul proper. If, therefore, the soul is directly engaged with the Supreme, naturally all other subordinates, namely the intelligence, mind, and senses, will be automatically engaged. In the Katha Upanishad, there is a similar passage in which it is said that the objects of sense gratification are superior to the senses, and mind is superior to the sense objects. If therefore the mind is directly engaged in the service of the Lord constantly, then there is no chance that the senses will become engaged in other ways. This mental attitude has already been explained. Param drishtva nivartate. If the mind is engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is no chance of its being engaged in the lower propensities. In the Katha Upanishad, the soul has been described as Mahan, the great. Therefore, the soul is above all, namely the sense objects, the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. Therefore, directly understanding the constitutional position of the soul is the solution to the whole problem. With intelligence, one has to seek out the constitutional position of the soul and then engage the mind always in Krishna consciousness. That solves the whole problem. A neophyte spiritualist is generally advised to keep aloof from the objects of the senses. But aside from that, one has to strengthen the mind by use of intelligence. If by intelligence one engages one's mind in Krishna consciousness, by complete surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then automatically the mind becomes stronger. And even though the senses are very strong, like serpents, they will be no more effective than serpents with broken fangs. But even though the soul is the master of intelligence and mind, and the senses also, still, unless it is strengthened by association with Krishna in Krishna consciousness, there is every chance of falling down due to the agitated mind. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshu unmilitam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So we're coming to the end of the chapter, and with it the end of this wonderful section on lust, on combating lust. Where is the enemy? Arjuna's on the battlefield. That's not those thousands of soldiers on the other side. It's his uncontrolled mind. That comes up again in the 6th chapter. So this wonderful analysis here, you notice it ends in text 42, which we read. Yobudhe badatastu sa, that your intelligence is superior to all these other elements. So Krishna consciousness, what are we doing when we're reading Srila Prabhupada's books or listening to a class or whatever, is that we're applying our intelligence to the philosophy. And it's strengthening the intelligence. I love this verse. It's just so pertinent. The kama dinang katina katita palita doni deshas. I'll spare you all the Sanskrit. But in how many ways have I sought to obey the seductive demands of my wicked desires? They've shown me no mercy, yet on I've gone shamelessly trying to quench lust's unquenchable fires, as it says right here. It burns like fire, is never satisfied, right? But now I'm rejecting those hellish desires. Now how are you rejecting? He described. Now I'm rejecting those hellish desires, but for my higher intelligence now has awoken. O Krishna, O shelter of fearlessness, please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. So this is a point at which all serious bhakti yogis need to come to. We're actually engaging the whole way in which Krishna consciousness is spread. It doesn't necessarily appeal at first to the intelligence. It may appeal to the tongue. Prasadam. Prasadam is a very powerful weapon. And Krishna's there. When it's prepared with proper consciousness and offered nicely, then Krishna, he can attract you, it's an attractive feature. And the whole idea is that if someone comes into the Sangha, general Sangha, then you'll hear the holy name, most importantly, but you'll also hear Krishna Katha. And Prabhupada gave us so much source, these sources of Krishna Katha. I was just reading, I don't know how, did you get, I don't think, no, did anyone get a email from Bhadri Narayan Swami with the Back to Godhead attached? All right, just send me an email to remind me, I'll send you. It's really a nice issue. I worked on that magazine, but we've got some really first-class writers there now. I mean, this Chaitanya Charan, who's he's an editor of the magazine. He writes, I think, it's 2 months, every 2 months now. But it's an excellent article, and several other articles. One was about this lady who I remember back when I was living in L.A. and in the 70s and 80s, Rose Forcash. She was the mother of a devotee who joined in L.A. And a lot of the parents were aghast. They were saying, "What are you doing?" I remember my father. They wouldn't dream of kidnapping me. That was the deprogramming. You must have heard of the deprogramming era. But my mother was favorable. She was a subscriber to Back to Godhead magazine, which was then monthly. I worked on it. I'll tell you something kind of funny. I don't know. I can think up all these. Anyway, so I would write articles for the Back to God every now and then. And I wrote an article based on Prabhupada's story. He gave so many wonderful analogy stories, that teach a Krishna conscious lesson. So how many of you have heard of the story of the bird in the cage? The bird in the cage? So the story goes that a lady wanted to get a caged bird. And so she went to a store that has those, and there was a beautiful bird in a beautiful cage. There's a wealthy woman. I always think of her living on the east side in New York, in Manhattan, because that's it. And so she bought the beautiful bird in the beautiful cage. We took it home, to her apartment. And it's a golden cage, and it was very nice. So she was so appreciative of that cage that she would polish the cage every day, and she would make sure that it was completely free of dust, and it was a nice part of it. And she forgot about the bird. And the bird was, quack, 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 feed me, and she didn't feed the bird. So the idea is that the soul is the bird in the cage. The body is the cage, one of many cages. Even in one lifetime, we have many different varieties. So we don't want to do that. We have to feed the needs of the soul, and the need of the soul is to contact the Lord again, and to hearing the Hare Krishna mantra, chanting all the things of bhakti. Otherwise, the soul is suffering in there, and eventually has to go to another body, and its suffering continues. So at that time, we had a very skilled artist living in LA. At a certain point, I was in New York with the BTG crew, and the artist was in Los Angeles, where most of the artists lived. And he was able to do, not long-time paintings, but he would do colored drawings that were very effective. So he drew this. I can bring the magazine, and I have all these old magazines, and you can see it. And there was the lady. She happened to be an old lady and so, no offense. And she was dusting the cage, and the bird was looked like it was about ready to die of starvation. That was a full-page illustration, and then I had my explanation of it. So my mother was, from beginning, she subscribed to the magazine, because I worked on it. So she would, it was very nice she would get it. So then what happened was that she complained to me. I don't know if she called me or wrote me a letter, I forget it. Or maybe the next time I visited. That woman looks like me. And I said, you're right. It does look like you. Mom, I swear, I didn't send him a photograph of you. It was funny. But anyway, the point is very salient, is that we go through many lifetimes, in human lifetimes, then back down, having no idea who we actually are. This is like a coat of, it's clothes. Krishna compares it to a suit of clothes, the body. And eventually, like every, shirt or clothes that we have, they wear out, you have to get new ones. So that's death. You take the old clothes off, put on new clothes. But in our actually lifetime, of ordinary lifetime condition, you don't think like that. You identify with the body, with the so-called suit of clothes. And that's the big mistake. And that leads us, the intelligence has those ideas. And you become very excited about nationalism. It starts with the family and everything. Then we're the same race. We speak the same language. We all live here. Okay, we have to defend the homeland and all this stuff. You're identifying with that. That Krishna says, Yasyatma buddhi kunapeti dhatuge. That anyone who's identifying with this bag of flesh and blood and bone and blood and all these other things as oneself has the intelligence of a cow or an jackass, donkey. Not very good. So this is, of course, not so much detail, but the same principle is there, is that with our intelligence, it's so important, hearing the truth from the mouth of the realized soul, or from the reading the Shastra, then light should go off. And we should say, oh, this is who I really am. I'm really this soul. And what could be more encouraging, encouraging that we're eternal. We never die, we never born. But if we identify ourselves as this mortal body, then we'll experience death as if we are dying, and that will be the most traumatic thing, and then we'll likely lose the human form of life and go down. We still have an intelligence, but it's much more rudimentary, So in this human form of life, the key is the higher intelligence. That would really differentiates us from the animals. But if we don't use it to enter into Dharma, and actually take on the Sanatana Dharma, the eternal function of the soul, which is bhakti, then it's a great tragedy, and we can go down. And probably maybe millions of years before you come back again, If you really go down into the animal species or the insects, or heaven forbid, the fish, whatever. So therefore, we want to discipline ourselves. And yes, it's a struggle because we're so conditioned to identify with the body and identify pleasure with the sense pleasure and all of these different things. So it is a struggle. And that's why Lord Rishabdev says, it's such a dramatic verse, this first verse of the 5th chapter of the 5th canto, where he begins his instructions to his sons. He's about ready to take sannyas. He's the king, but he's giving it off to the senior king, who is Bharat. And you know what happened with Bharat. Bharat also left, he was the king, but he left, he was a young man. He goes out and then he got attracted to a deer. Had to come back as a deer. But because he had advanced so much, even in the deer body, he didn't associate with the other deer. He would kind of hang out where the sadhus were talking about Krishna, and he'd listen in. And then he was reborn as a Brahmin, but he decided to act like he was couldn't speak, that he was kind of dumb. That was why he's Jadabhart. You remember that? And so they gave him a job of taking care of just observing the cows and trying to take care of the cows because I thought his intelligence wasn't very good. And so some Kali worshippers, they're looking for a candidate to perform human sacrifice. Oh, he's a good candidate. He's not very smart, so he won't give any objection. So you know the story. I don't know if some of you haven't heard it. So they take him into the temple. There's this Kali temple, and he's just, he's not objecting, freaking out or anything, because he's fully Krishna conscious inside. But when they were going to cut his head off, Kali comes out of the Kali Murti, with the garland of what? Skulls. A garland of skulls, and she's furious, and I think she has some rage and so forth, and they behead all the dacoits, the Kali worshippers, and they add their heads to the garlands, And Jadabhart says, thank you, and he goes out, and he's Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So it's quite a story, and eventually he breaks out of his Jada. Jada means silent, right? He can't talk. They thought he was stupid, but he's really. So King Rahugana comes by and they engage him. Oh, he's stout and strong, stout and strong. So they needed a new palanquin carrier, for the king. So they employ him, the king, but then he's, he doesn't want to kill any insects, so he's not steady with the palanquin. So they get in his case, and Rahugana starts chastising him, and finally he replies and starts preaching philosophy. And Rahugana said, "Oh my God!" He said, "Bhakti." He gets off the palanquin. He offers it. It's what, the palanquin is hurting him?
Yeah, the king told that Bharata, that guy, you are moving this side, that side, that's why it's hurting me. In Sanskrit he told, but Sanskrit grammar was incorrect. So he corrected that grammar.
Oh.
They get to know that he is a great scholar.
Is that in the Bhagavatam?
Yeah.
Oh, I must have forgotten. Okay, I forgot that part. Anyway, it turns out then he starts giving all of the instruction. There's a whole chapter of him instructing him. In philosophy. Yeah, I know. Right. That's what I'm saying. And Rahugana, as far as I remember, he got off the palanquin and offered his obeisance, right? Because this is a great sage, So anyway, it was quite a story. But the point being made here is that there's a hierarchy. The senses, they're dumb senses. They'll just go after what they want. Unless you guide them, you have to restrict. So back to this first verse, because it's so important. Nayam deho deha bhajang loke Kṛṣṇaṃ kāmanānate bhujange tapo divyam putraka yena sattvam shuddhye jisma brahma saukyam tvanantam. Now I took that verse and I kind of made a little poem out of it, but I changed a little bit, so I'll give you the poem, but then I'll explain the difference. Oh friend, don't waste this precious. Don't waste your precious human life by working hard for hoggish happiness. He actually gives that example. Like, don't be like the hogs who eat stool-eating hogs. Oh, friend, don't waste your precious human life by working hard for Harga's happiness through bhakti yoga. I forget, there's a rhyme in there. Through bhakti yoga, worldly life transcend and learn to taste divine love's endless bliss. So the bhakti yoga part is that you have to perform austerity. You see? Nayam deho de bhajang niloke Kṛṣṇan kaman adate vidbhujange. Those who are in the human form of life, deha bhajam, nayam deho deha bhajam nriloke. Nri is short for nara, which means human being. So all you sons of mine, you've been born as human beings. You know, so he's instructing them. Not to work hard. Kṛṣṇan, very hard for low-grade happiness, you know, sensual happiness. Rather, tapo divyam putraka yena sattvam, very, very famous line. O sons, you have to perform divine penance, because there's also austerity in the mode of ignorance, like Hiranyakashipu. He performed more extreme austerity than any bhakta needs to perform. But his goal was to become stronger and stronger and rule the universe and, you know, all that stuff. So his intelligence was completely fixed on me and mine. So that's not it. Tapo divyam, you know, those austerities within the realm of bhakti yoga. Putraka yena sattvam shuddhyet. By those austerities you will purify your existence, and this is such an important point. And then what? What's the good of that? Putraka sattvam shuddhyet yasmad brahma saukyam tvanantam. By that purification, you will come to the point of enjoying endless spiritual happiness, as opposed to flickering sense gratification, which degrades and leads to more suffering. So that's the choice that we all face. There has to be some austerity, because we're in a body and we're habituated through many, many lifetimes to go for the sense gratification and get entangled. You know, that's conditioned life. But having come in contact with the bhaktas and the bhakti and the bhakti shastra and all of these things, our intelligence can be purified and then control the lower self. And the wonderful thing about bhakti is it's not like, you know, Ashtanga yoga, you got to go to the Himalayas, you know, and all of this stuff. No, it's not like that, because Lord Chaitanya, Krishna as Lord Chaitanya, has made it very pleasurable, and there's no hard and fast rules, which means no one is barred. You know, if you try to study the Vedas, you go to India and say, who are you? You try to get into the Jagannath temple, you can't. And maybe you can get in, or maybe you guys can get in. I could never get in. Bhakti Tirtha Swami got in, because he has a dark complexion, yeah. And I think he had a sannyasa and everything. Anyway, so, you know, we're not really taking the orthodox Vedic, you know, thing. That's not it. It's Lord Chaitanya's line of devotional service, which begins with hearing and chanting and feasting and celebrating. Everybody, you know, he's on the street, and, you know, traveling into South India, and he's dancing and chanting, and people are joining him, and they're becoming very advanced in love of God. They go home to their village, and people associated with them, and that they also become devotees. It's like a, you know, it's the epidemic, but it's with the an epidemic of wholesome life. Yeah. So this idea, intelligence. So the strength of the intelligence. And my higher intelligence now has awakened. Oh, please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. So with that higher intelligence, because it may become eclipsed again if we don't follow it, because we're always being exposed to everything, and we have old friends, you know, who you associate with, and all this kind of stuff. So you have to strike while the iron is hot, kind of idea. Okay, now I'm curious about this. Now I'm really going to read this book that I got 6 years ago and has been on my shelf, and I met that nice devotee. Now I think I'm going to let that Bhagavad Gita book. There's even cases where the book fell off the shelf and hit you in the head, and the guy started reading it, became a devotee. You know, Krishna's taken the initiative. Hey, boom! You know, okay, all right. So we don't have to. We're nicely coming, taking the sacrifice of coming to the class. So now we can read the last verse unless anyone has a question. Okay, so now here's the culmination of all the instruction in this chapter. Evam buddhe param buddha Sangstabhyatmanamatmana Jahi Shatrum Mahabaho Kamarupam Durasadam. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, Almighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. Purport. This third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is conclusively directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead without considering impersonal voidness the ultimate end. In the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overlording and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and the intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind, by steady intelligence directed toward one's pure identity. This is the sum total of this chapter. In the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculation and artificial attempts to control the senses by the so-called practice of yogic postures can never help a man toward spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. He's got the page, he's got the book. Okay, there you go. Thus then the Bhaktivedanta purports to the third chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of karma yoga, or the discharge of one's prescribed duty in Krishna consciousness. So just a quick review. This is called karma yoga, which obviously means that it's going to focus on what we actually do and other activities that we perform, because that's where we live. But you can see the end of the whole thing, of the chapter, is the essential instruction that we need to strengthen our intelligence so that we can direct the mind and the senses to do things that we may not be spontaneously attracted to do right away. Right? This is the austerity. That famous verse about surrender. Anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya bharjanam. So those are the first two things. To do those things which are favorable for Krishna consciousness, like chanting Hare Krishna, getting up early in the morning, and not doing those things that are harmful for Krishna consciousness. And if you think of it, this is a principle that is there for any goal that you want to achieve. I give the example of sports. You have a goal. Oh, maybe I can be an Olympic gold medalist. The kid that's 13 years old. And so, okay, I'll run here and there. I remember when I was in high school, I was thinking, because I was pretty athletic. Is a little bit left out when I try to dance in the kirtan. But usually I hurt my ankles at this point. But anyway, so I was thinking, maybe I'll join the wrestling team. Don't laugh. So then I learned that they have a very serious program of conditioning, of running. Okay, that's not for me. Then I thought next thing was the basketball team, because I like to play basketball. And then I realized, no, the coach, I don't like that coach. It's not. So I ended up just being a bookworm, and I was second in my class in the whole class. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But the thing is, that is a way in which the material mind goes, right? You're endowed with certain strength, and if you try to go in that direction, you become an artist, you become a dancer, you become a student, whatever it may be, and your mind, intelligence, and senses are engaged, and the mind is serving the intelligence, which is deciding to do this and this and this, so that you can achieve a certain goal. But it's a material goal, and ultimately it doesn't help you. It just binds you more and more, entangling in the material world. So this process of Krishna consciousness, the mind, intelligence, and senses are still there, and they are the tools that the soul has to work with. So the process of Vaidhi Bhakti is important to remember. Vaidhi are the instructions of the Shastra. So that stage of bhakti is acting according to rules and regulations. So what is a rule and regulation? Is it probably that, the rules are the don'ts, I think, and the regulations are the do's, if I'm not mistaken. Although I know maybe the 4 regs are don'ts, so it's just the opposite. Rules are what you do, regulations what you don't do. So that, adopting those with the higher, and realizing, yes, there's going to be some austerity here. That's why tapo divyam. It means undertaking voluntary difficulties for a higher end, because it's prescribed as a purifying process, and you undertake it, and sometimes it's difficult. It's difficult to fix your mind, because the mind is rebelling. It's so conditioned to want to do things that are just pleasurable. What are you doing here? You're getting up. It's like when you join the ashram. What is this? Getting up in the middle of the night at 4 o'clock? So some people come and they spend a weekend. That's all as far as they can go. But if you get over that, then you're encouraged. And you've heard, many of you, this is the defect of listening to these classes all the time. You heard the stories so many times before. The first cold shower I ever took, that was a hurdle. I didn't have any cold showers. Taking a shower, it was always like, all right, you say, and get a hot shower, warm shower, and that it's sense gratification. But a cold water, what is that? But that was the story. There was no hot water. So am I going to just leave the temple now, or am I going to? Anyway, the technique, I told you this. I had been practicing, hatha yoga for a while, which is very beneficial actually, physically anyway. And so I would practice also pranayama, everything rudimentary pranayama actually. But the whole thing, pressing the nose, which Prabhupada always puts down. No, you can't go back to Gata just by pressing the nose. But it does calm the mind. But then there was the heating breath. You should try it sometime if you get cold, So I said, I'm going to do that. We were all lined up, ready to go into the shower, And so when my turn came, I said, okay, this is the major test. Either I'm going to be able to do this, or I got to leave the temple. So, I'm going to. And I went in there, and then it was a short shower. It was maybe a 17-second shower. But I passed, I soaked up real quick. And it's actually... It's important. It wakes you up, and you're ready to chant Hare Krishna and everything like that. So that's, and the hour, so you have to get to bed early. That means cutting out all the nonsense in the evening that you usually do, all that stuff. So we would have evening program, I love that evening program. Just imagine all the devotees. Now you had the temple, say, half full. When I came here in '89, there were a lot of devotees who lived nearby and everything. And, we had 30, 40 for every Mangal Artik. But still, the evening program wasn't happening. That kind of with the advent of book distribution, where all the main devotees who were going out, they would come back at 7 o'clock and they'd take prasadam, so that they couldn't come to the evening program. So it kind of died naturally. But I was there for a couple of years before book distribution took off. At 73, 74, it started to take off late 74. So during that time, everyone had to be an evening program, and it was great, because Mangal Artik is very meditative. The lights are down, and everyone is, you may dance a little bit, but it's not like evening. But the evening, the lights are up, and Kiba Jaya, Jaya Gora Chandra, this song they would sing. You heard of it? And it's a meditation of Lord Chaitanya being worshipped on the bank of, the Mahaprakash, where he revealed himself to me. So anyway, there's that, and then everybody's, enlivened the whole day of devotional service. So that became, then gradually, and so you forget the mind, your conditioning, all of the other forms of pleasure. We didn't even have newspapers or anything. I didn't know what was going on in the world, and I didn't care very much for a while. Then suddenly we had trouble filling the tanks of the vans for the Sankirtan devotees. There was like a whole restriction of gasoline. What's going on? And I heard this is I don't know if you know about it. There was an oil crisis in the OPEC was formed. OPEC was formed, which is an alliance of all the Middle Eastern countries. It means that they're going to hike the price. And if you don't like it, then you can't buy it. So it was a real big thing. But that passed, and life went on. So the thing in Krishna consciousness, the austerities, after some time, they're not so austere, because you're tasting Krishna conscious pleasure. This is the transcendental pleasure. And the wonderful thing is, anytime you want, you can chant Hare Krishna. Nobody's going to stop you. And if you're really chanting purely and sincerely, it's going to be a great source of happiness and peace and wonderful. That's the engine, Lord Chaitanya's movement, and that was the main feature, chanting. But it's also important to purify the intelligence by hearing these words from the Shastra. All right, we can launch into 4. Now, this is interesting, this first verse, and I'll explain what I realized from it. Shri Bhagavana Vacha Imam Vivastate Yogam Proktavan Ahamabhyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manurikshvakave Bravit. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god, Vivasvan. And Vivasvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind. And Manu, in turn, instructed it to Ikshvaku. Purport. Herein we find the history of the Bhagavad Gita traced from a remote time when it was delivered to the royal order of all planets, beginning from the sun planet. The kings of all planets are especially meant for the protection of the inhabitants, and therefore the royal order should understand the science of the Bhagavad Gita, in order to be able to rule the citizens and protect them from material bondage to lust. Human life is meant for cultivation of spiritual knowledge in eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the executive heads of all states and all planets are obliged to impart this lesson to the citizens by education, culture, and devotion. In other words, the executive heads of all states are intended to spread the science of Krishna consciousness so that the people may take advantage of this great science and pursue a successful path utilizing the opportunity of the human form of life. In the millennium of the sun god, in this millennium, the sun god is known as Vivasvan, the king of the sun, which is the origin of all planets within the solar system. In the Brahma Samhita 552, it is stated, Yachakshiresa sapita sakalagrahanam raja samasta sudamurta dashesha tejaha yasyagaya brahmati sambitakala chakro govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. Let me worship, Lord Brahma said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, Krishna, who is the original person and under whose order the sun, which is the king of all planets, is assuming immense power and heat. The sun represents the eye of the Lord and traverses its orbit in obedience to his order. Close quote. The sun is the king of the planets, and the sun god of the name Vivasvan rules the sun planet, which is controlling all other planets by supplying heat and light. He is rotating under the order of Krishna, and Lord Krishna originally made Vivasvan his first disciple to understand the science of the Bhagavad Gita. The Gita is not, therefore, a speculative treatise for the insignificant, mundane scholar, but is a standard book of knowledge coming down from time immemorial. In the Mahabharata, Shanti Parva 348, 51, 52, we can trace out the history of the Gita as follows. Treta Yugadao Chatato, Vivasvan Manave Dadao, Manush Chaloka Bhityartam, Sutta Keshash. Sutta Yekshvakavev Dadao Ikshvakuna Chakatito Vyapya Loka Navastitaha. In the beginning of the millennium known as Treta Yuga, this science of the relationship with the Supreme was delivered by Vivasvan to Manu. Manu, being the father of mankind, gave it to his son Maharaj Ikshvaku, the king of this earth planet, and forefather of the Raghu dynasty, in which Lord Ramachandra appeared. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita existed in human society from the time of Maharaj Ikshvaku. At the present moment, we have just passed through 5,000 years of the Kali Yuga, which lasts 432,000 years. Before this, there was the Dwapara Yuga, 800,000 years, and before that, there was Treta Yuga, 1,200,000 years. Thus, some 2,005,000 years ago, Manu spoke the Bhagavad Gita to his disciple and son Maharaj Ikshvaku, the king of this planet Earth. The age of the current Manu is calculated to last some 305,300,000 years, of which 120,400,000 have passed. Accepting that before the birth of Manu, the Gita was spoken by the Lord to his disciple, the sun god Vivasvan, a rough estimate is that the Gita was spoken at least 120,400,000 years ago, and in human society it has been extant for 2 million years. It was re-spoken by the Lord, again to Arjuna, about 5,000 years ago. That is the rough estimate of the history of the Gita, according to the Gita itself, and according to the version of the speaker, Lord Sri Krishna. It was spoken to the sun god Vivasvan because he is also a Kshatriya and is the father of all Kshatriyas who are descendants of the sun god, or the Surya Vangsha Kshatriyas. Because the Bhagavad Gita is as good as the Vedas, being spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this knowledge is apaurushaya, superhuman. Since the Vedic instructions are accepted as they are, without human interpretation, the Gita must therefore be accepted without mundane interpretation. The mundane wranglers may speculate on the Gita in their own ways, but that is not the Bhagavad Gita as it is. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita has to be accepted as it is from the disciplic succession, and it is described herein that the Lord spoke to the sun god spoke to his son Manu, and Manu spoke to his son Ikshvaku. So this is a little bit of the history of the Bhagavad Gita in human society. And these numbers, by the way, I think we did a revision on them, some of them a little bit adjusting. But it's been extant in human society for a long, long time. And the principles here, you can see, when is it not going to be appropriate? Najayate mriyate vakadachan. It's forever. It's not something that's bound by some times. It's, for the soul, there is never birth nor death at any time. He doesn't come into being, etc. He's unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. That's always going to be pertinent and always going to be true. And that's true of all the verses of the Bhagavad Gita and the whole science of the Bhagavad Gita. But you can see, because it's so famous, the Bhagavad Gita, on my computer, because of the work I do, I have 6 or 8 other Bhagavad Gitas that sometimes I consult in my editing. And some of them are not bona fide, but some of them are there's also Bhagavad Gita written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, translation. Sridhar, I think Sridhar Swami Prabhupada's godbrother did the translation and so forth. And these are sometimes important to consult for certain questions. But you can see there's a real critical difference between the ones that are like this famously, this Radha Krishnan Gita, which I bought on Amazon. It's still for sale. He was once the president, I think, of India at one point. But, isn't he? Yeah. And anyway, he wrote this with a commentary is practically nil. There's a few lines, and oftentimes there's no commentary. But he famously, during Prabhupada's time, he wrote his Gita, Prabhupada's time in India, and for 934, the famous verse, Manmana bhava madbhakto, think of me, become my devotee, bow down to me, worship me, certainly you'll come to me. He said in his commentary there, it's not to the person Krishna that we have to surrender, but to the unborn eternal within Krishna. Which is like, right, is that, wait a minute, there's no internal, Krishna is pure spirit. He's not like us. We have an internal, we are a self, and we're covered by a material body. So it was so far off, and that was, people read that, and so Prabhupada, in this purport, when we get to it, you'll see he mentions that, how this is crazy. And there's a pastime, he was there, visited Radha Krishna when he was about to die. And Prabhupada, by that time, he had spread the movement and he was famous and everything, so he came to see him. And so here's Radha Krishna says, "Oh, please play to your, Krishna for my welfare. Now I'm about to die." He became a personalist on his deathbed. Because impersonally, who do you pray to? That's you're bereft. So that's a great advantage, and that's one thing I wanted to stress, and maybe for the the Krishna consciousness, starts with a prayer. The essential thing is the Hare Krishna mantra. And what does it mean? It's a prayer that the Radha and Krishna, please engage me in your service. And we need to feel that's an essential part of the chanting. It's not just a meditation, it's that also. But it's also meant to be chanted with feeling, to calling on Radha and Krishna, please show mercy on me and engage me in your service. And that's also the important, so many other verses and songs. There's one song of Rupa Goswami I put into a poem, and it's there, and the Prabhupada gave a translation in the purport in the second canto, I think it is. And it has this, the beats. Deva Bhavandam Vande Manmana Samantakadama Payanita Patapankatamakadande. O Krishna, dearest Lord, I bow to you and then entreat. Please place to be in my restless mind in the honey of your lotus feet. And then he goes on, Yadapi Samadhi Shabidadapi Pashidanandamanakagamidichim. Idamicham in the Shamitavachit Tadabikapapativichim. Though even Brahma, deep in trance, cannot achieve his goal, a glimpse of your effulgent toenails soothing to the soul. Because, O Lord, I've heard of your compassion's endless waves. This very vision is the only boon my poor heart craves. Hey, Krishna Bhavandam Vande, Manmanasamantakadamapa, you need to put the pankatamakadande. Anyway, it goes on like that. But it's all a prayer. These songs they're prayers. And that is a feature and a facility that the bhaktas have, but the impersonators don't have. They can't pray to anybody because they don't believe anyone's out there. So you can see how faulty that philosophy is. So we can pray, and Rupa Goswami has given such nice prayers. I shared this one, I think, in the morning class. In the Leela Chanda, which is the summary of Krishna's Vrindavan Leela, which is available there in the Veda base. He's trying to wrestle the Veda base. And he says, I'll skip the Sanskrit, he says, my dear Lord, O Lord of the calves, because Krishna, this is just the beginning of it where he's become a calf herd, and he has, the calf of my mind has wandered away from the sweet nectareous stream of the Bhagavatam with all the wonderful descriptions of your Leela and pastimes, and has gone into a dirty ditch to drink the swill of sense gratification. Please take your stick of mercy. Calf herd, you have to have a little, as a boy I had those small sticks, for the calf. And bring it back to that ocean of, that stream of nectar, so that my calf of my mind can relish, So that's and there's beautiful prayers. I won't get into it because it's not time. In the Namashtaka, this is the 8 verses about the holy name. Again, I think there's no 9th verse, so they may have been collected from other verses, that he wrote. But there are 8 verses about the holy name, and several of them are prayers to the holy name to please give me more attraction for you, so that I'll taste, always relish the name. And I always like to point out, there's this wonderful devotee, he's the son of an old friend of mine. His name is Madhuri Pura. He's a disciple of Vaisheshika Prabhu, who gave him that name because it's part of the last verse of the Namashtaka. Nada vino jivana sudormini yasa Madhuri Pura tram Krishna nama kamam spadameva sanheva sena sada. So this boy who grew up, he became a very nice kirtaniya, So it says, O holy name, you are the inspiration for the Vina of Narada. Narada Vina Ujjivana, the life and soul. Narada Vina Ujjivana Sudhormi, there's waves of nectar. Niryasa, concentrated nectar, thick nectar. Niryasa Madhuri Pura, you're like a flood of the sweetness of the great concentrated nectar for the soul, the taste, So he's saying, please, may I always taste the sweetness as I chant your holy name. May it always resonate in my mouth with great attraction. So it's like praying to and also when you chant Hare Krishna, you can have a prayer thinking like that. Please let me, let my mind always, hear every syllable. Praying to the name through the name. I came up with that on one of these japa retreats, that you're chanting Hare Krishna. Haribol, welcome. He's finally come. Would you like to sit down? You can complete it. Haribol. Okay, this means that it's almost time for the arti. But we have another minute or two for a nice little poem. So, actually, there was a one-liner that I was teaching to the boys this morning, and you weren't there, I don't think. Were you there? That boy was named Nicholas or something. The boy who was here from L.A.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Nicholas.
Yeah. So anyway, you can all take this. So we have a minute. So it's just a one-liner. I beg to be blessed by the best of the bliss-filled boys of Vrindavan Dham. What do you think? You can chant it. I beg to be blessed by the best of the bliss-filled boys of Vrindavan Dham. Oh wretched mind, just worship Shri Shri Radha Krishna Chandra and dive into an ocean full of endless bliss and wonder. You know, instruct the mind, right? Manak Shiksha. There's a whole poem, Rupa Goswami, isn't it? So these are, to bring them into the English language, there's the value to that, because that's why I started the project. All right, we need to adjourn now. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.